Welcome to Financial Accounting with CA Campus. I'm Bianca now and I will be your lecturer for this year. I do hope that you enjoy this course with us. In this video, we are going to look at how to approach financial accounting with CA Campus. Our CA Campus classes are divided into lectures and tutorials. You must understand and know your theory before you are able to attempt any questions. Therefore, we are going to cover our principles and theory first. Once you are familiar with these principles, you are allowed to move on to your tutorials. Please do not make the mistake of studying from questions. You study principles and theory, and you need to understand how to apply the theory. And then you are able to do questions. The purpose of doing a question is to identify if you know the theory and if you know how to apply the theory. Now, when we look at our lectures, I want you to please follow the following steps. Remember, financial accounting in terms of IFRS is a bunch of rules and principles that you need to know and that you need to know how to apply these rules. Now, our step number one, you need to watch the lecture. To be able to watch the lecture, you need to first print the lecture material. Then you need to watch the lecture recordings while working through the lecture notes. You are not allowed to lie on bed. You're not allowed to sit on your couch. You need to sit up straight at your desk and focus. Then you will identify for majority of the standards that we cover. I do provide you with a revision page, normally a 1-page or a 2-page summary of that specific standard. Now, why do I provide you with this? Right, now at the end of your CTA year, you will have quite a significant amount of principles that you need to know. And I prefer to study them by having something visual that I can see. Therefore, I normally compile a 1-pager document with all the important principles that I identify to be important. But it is crucial that you need to make this document your own. My recommendation, as you watch through the lecture videos, you need to please have this page open with you and view this page. This will save you a little bit of time in terms of your revision period. Then I've also included here that through my years of lecturing, I've identified that some students might prefer to read through their IFRS standards first before looking at the notes. Please remember, looking at your IFRS standards is very time consuming. Therefore, you need to allocate sufficient time to work through your standards. Now, in step number 2, I want you to ensure that you work through your IFRS standard. This is the time that you need to use to highlight your core principles. Remember, your standard should work for you in a test or an exam, not against you. Therefore, it's not a coloring in competition. You need to have a plan of action. Throughout the year, I will provide you with sections of videos to indicate to you how I would personally highlight certain sections. I'm not allowed to do this with every single standard because IFRS is internationally copyright protected. You will identify the bold paragraphs are normally your very important paragraphs, and then the paragraphs below your bold paragraphs will explain the bold paragraphs. Again, working through your IFRS is very time consuming. It's not a coloring in competition, remember. Then your step number 3, you need to revise the lecture. Now this is where you are allowed to make use of your revision page. Now, once you feel comfortable with your principles, you need to move on to your tutorials, and we are going to test your knowledge. Your first step will be to attempt the tutorial question under exam conditions within the allocated time by actually writing your attempt without looking at the suggested solution. Therefore, you need to close your door. You need to allocate sufficient time for reading and sufficient time for attempting the question. Now, important. We recommend that when you start with a question, make use of one color pen. For example, blue. As soon as your time runs out, continue with another color and finish that question. During your marking, you will be able to identify if you will be able to pass a question within the allocated time. Then remember, you have access to your IFRS handbook, but you cannot open your IFRS textbooks for the very first time in a test or an exam. You need to spend some time to properly highlight, underline, and sideline. Step number 2 now, this is your difficult step. You need to mark your attempt. Therefore, you now need to obtain the solution and mark your attempt line by line, amount by amount, and please make time to watch the tutorial videos. We include exam technique discussions to help you pass these questions. Please do not rush the marking process. Remember, this can sometimes take longer than actually attempting the question. Now the difficult section after you've marked your attempt. You need to ensure that you understand where you went wrong. Now this is difficult because it's in our human nature. We don't like to know what we are doing wrong. But this is the only way that you are actually going to learn where to improve. Now, I just want you to add one here as well. Exam technique. A lot of students sometimes fail questions because they lack proper exam technique. An exam technique is your easy marks in any question or an exam. Now, where you went wrong. Number 1, do you not know the answer? Or do you not know how to apply the principle? Therefore, you thought you knew the principle, but you don't know the principle. You need to be extremely honest with yourself here. Then you will have to go back to the lecture material and ensure that you know the principle and know how to apply the principle. You need to study the rule, know how to apply the rule. You do have your IFRS textbook with you, but you need to still know these rules. Number 2, are you reading the information provided in a question properly? When you read during a question, it is crucial that you read carefully to ensure that you understand what you are reading and that you don't miss anything. Now, I've received quite a lot of queries in the past where students indicate to me that they start to read through a question, but they feel completely lost. If you feel completely lost, you need to go back to your lecture notes. You need to go back to your rules. When you read through a paragraph, you should be able to understand what you are reading. Number 3, did you read the required incorrectly? This is very important. Now, I indicate that you need to read a requirement at least 3 times because normally the first time you just scan through the requirements to see if you're able to answer the questions. I know I also did that. Then the second time you read it and underline or circle, and then the third time you actually analyze the requirement. It is important when you read through a requirement and you identify an and, that you need to identify that there is another section to be answered. You need to read carefully and ensure that you understand what you are reading. Now, you will identify when you look at the tutorials, I refer to a plan of action. This is important because sometimes you read through your requirement and you just start to answer that question without actually thinking of what you need to write down. Now, a plan of action, you don't always have to draft down, but I want you to think about this. This will take a little bit of time in the beginning, but once you have a plan of action, normally you are able to score easy marks first, and this will help you to answer a question. Then, are you able to pass within the required time? Now, this is important. You will remember that we have touched on time at the top when you attempt a question, 2 different color pens. Guys, if you have identified that you're not able to finish a question within the allocated time, the only way that you can solve this is to practice your time management in each question. And this is normally the problem with discussion questions. This is where your plan of action is important, and it is important that you practice time management. Unfortunately, you will have to do questions to be able to improve on this. Then, please note, the oh yes method will not work for CTA. If you are planning on following your oh yes method, please stop, deregister, don't waste your time, don't waste your money. It's not going to work. You need to know your principles. Then, when you attempt a question and you get overwhelmed with that question, normally I get an email, but I just went blank, or I have this feeling that I'm extremely lost. Yes, sometimes you can get a blank due to feeling sick or being ill. Definitely, guys, you can. But if you are healthy and you approach a question and you feel lost, a blank, you don't know your principles. Okay, again, IFRS is a bunch of rules that you need to know. And then important, if you can't identify where you went wrong, this means that you don't know the theory. Step number 3, you now need to make a summary of your learning points. Now this is the revision page. I provide you with a layout and the most important principles. But remember, you need to make this document your own. Add relevant detail as and when you work through questions and you identify that certain principles are asked which you can't remember. You are able to add this to your revision page. Remember, the summary page is there to help you. Now, something that I normally did, and I'm going to include this here, how did I personally, Bianca, study financial accounting? My summary pages, I will stick them to my cupboard anywhere where I am able to view them regularly. I'll stick them on my cupboard, I'll stick them in the kitchen, in front of the fridge, anywhere that I know I can briefly just look at them. I don't have to spend a lot of time, but I can look at them. By looking at them regularly, your long-term memory will remember the layout. You might not remember the little nitty-gritty details, but your long-term memory will remember the layout. And then when you need to study these pages or study the principles, you will be able to remember the layout, and it's easier for your brain to be able to include the smaller sections. Right, therefore, how did I study? I followed the steps on the previous page, and I would call this my big black book. I will have my revision pages with me, and I will have my IFRS textbooks with me already flagged, highlighted, underlined, and so forth. And then in my big black book, which can be any book, but please try not to make use of an exam pad where the pages fall out and you need to throw them away or they get lost. Now in this book, I will attempt a question. So let's say, for example, this is my mock test 1. And I will attempt the question within the allocated time. My time's finished. I will continue in another color pen. Right. Now I need to mark my attempt. I need to compare this to the solution and I identify that this principle is incorrect. I don't know, for example, how to calculate and test for impairment. As I mark through the question and I identify that I will have to work on my speed, I will keep this book and I will add what did I do wrong and how will I correct this. By writing this down, by seeing this, by reading through this, your memory will remember these principles. And I will keep this question because it might be in this question we've tested a principle from the left to the right. But then in another question, we've tested that same principle from the right to the left. And I will make notes to be able to come back to and revise to ensure that I do not make the same mistakes going forward. Then remember, please, your IFRS textbooks should work for you and not against you. There is a video that you can watch on how to highlight, flag, underline, and so forth. Psychoexaminal pronouncements is important when you write your ITC. And then included in the lecture plans of certain weeks, I will document important information to assist you with certain topics or additional guidance on how to approach the studies of that week. Therefore, please do make time and read through these documents. They are there to help you. If you have any questions related to our CA Campus material, you are welcome to send me a message through the student platform or send me an email at bianca@cacampus.co.za.